Welcome in to the Bobby Carpenter Show, man. We've got a huge show for you today. I'm sitting here with my man Joshua Perry, who's going to be joining us for the foreseeable future. We will even be joined by my man Anthony Schlegel, who will be hopping in as well here, probably in the second segment. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. We're going to preview the Super Bowl. We got Senior Bowl week, the East-West Shrine, Big Ten, SEC making some moves. We're going to have fan questions, as we always do. Our tailgate talk, which is one of the favorites. But I want to start with this, Joshua, as we get into this. And Jeff Hafley, who came to Ohio State shortly after, a little bit after you left, it was Ryan Day's defensive coordinator, his first season, had the head coaching job at Boston College. And he leaves that to then become the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. Now, Hafley has NFL experience, and he's been linked there before, just like Ryan Day. And you've alluded to this, and you've talked about it a little bit. And there's some other coaches that have had this opportunity, leaving a head coaching job to go take a coordinator's position, which is going to be a fairly substantial pay cut. And you'd have to imagine, obviously, you're not running your own show, and assuming he still wanted to do that. Where do you think this stems from, and how much of it do you think has to do with the current climate of where college football is?
I mean, Jeff Hafley kind of told us that was where he was at when he made the decision. Pete Thamel said they spoke to sources over there at Boston College, and the idea is that the current climate of college football, particularly name, image, and likeness, and what that entails, and how much fundraising goes along with that, how much recruiting goes along with that, and even recruiting your own roster, squeezes the time that you have to actually coach football. And a lot of these guys are saying, I'm done with it. And, Jeff Hafley's a guy who's making probably, $4 million a year-ish at Boston College. You go to the NFL, be a coordinator, make $1 million, $1.5 million, maybe $2 million at the high end. It's a pay cut, but you get your quality of life back. I think these guys are willing to pay the money for their life. And I've alluded to it. You've heard people talk about it more now, obviously, with this, and we'll talk about what's happening with Chip Kelly. The sport is not in a great spot when you have the highest paid people and some of the most recognizable faces that are disenchanted with what's going on. And I wouldn't be shocked down the line here if you get some of the coaches like, use names here just because of what the resumes are, but, Kirby Smart with a couple of championships, Dabo Swinney with a couple of championships. These guys are independently wealthy now too. Let's be perfectly clear about how much money they're making. They could literally just walk away from the game. Dan Mullen's a guy that I look at where obviously things didn't necessarily go well at Florida, but it's almost like he was like, you know what, I didn't really love recruiting anyway. I'm just going to do the TV thing, and I'm going to have a lot of fun doing it. I'm going to be pretty good at it, and I'm not going to waste my time on somebody's sideline. So changes are needed in college football right now because you can't lose good coaches like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Hafley and it's NFL ties. You get back to actually just coaching football, and is like you said, would you be willing to trade $2 million for time? And everybody would look at that and think you're crazy. But when you've made a substantial sum of money, the one thing you can never buy in your life is time. We try to do all these different things, but you're trying to buy obviously that time and that quality of life back. And maybe he's getting that, and he just gets back down to coaching football again. And for those people, Joshua, and I know that there's been the argument that Jeff Hafley was on the hot seat, he was on his way out, and I think that it was a little warm, but he's at BC for 3 years or 4 years. They made they made a bowl game 3 times, and this year I think people expected them to go 4-8. They ended up getting to 500. They were ranked. I think at one point they had made a push. Boston College isn't really an easy place to win with, and I think they probably have a misalignment with expectations as opposed to the reality of kind of what they're dealing with. Kind of, it feels like they're maybe living in the past a little bit. So it's like at some point, hey, you know what? Let's go somewhere else and be able to have success. And to dovetail that, you mentioned Chip Kelly, who's at UCLA, and I think it's a similar situation there with him. He's linked potentially to the Raiders job before they made their hire. Now it's talking about him potentially going to the Commanders as an offensive coordinator. So he's leaving a place like UCLA, then they're coming into the Big Ten. But it seems like if you just want to coach football, that may be the route for you in the NFL. And it's wild to think these guys make so much money in college, but I think they're beginning to see the fracturing of what this climate has come about with the transfer portal and everything else, of just the amount of work and time that you have to spend on non-football related activities.
Right. And people do the same thing when it comes to Chip Kelly. How, there was conversation about whether he was going to be retained for this upcoming season. And Chip Kelly's a guy who doesn't necessarily love recruiting. He's just over 500 in his tenure at UCLA. Like, it's not like he's doing a great job. So maybe he's just trying to hedge. But I don't understand how it's hedging when you're leaving a $6 million a year job to take a demotion in title. And I know that the NFL is the pinnacle. There's also a dude who is a head coach in the NFL. He's going to go back and be a coordinator. Like, he is literally telling you what he feels about the state of college football right now. And I need people to understand that. And so like, solutions necessary 100%. I think fans would like to see it as well. You talked about expectations and misalignment in that regard. And I think part of the reason why is because of the current setup in college football, where people are looking at Syracuse, for example, and they bring in one of the best transfer classes, and their schedule is setting up to where they can make a little bit of a run. And everybody's like, well, how come people can't, flip their roster the way that Deion did with Colorado and what Syracuse is doing right now, and how Jeff Brom did it at Louisville? Well, not everybody can do that. It's not the way that you can build a program sustainably for most coaches. So yeah, a little bit crazy over here.
Well, everybody else isn't Deion Sanders, number one. Like, let's talk about the cachet of what he's walking into a room with. And so either you can have a big reputation, which is what Deion has. And I think that they're working the NIL stuff out in Colorado because he had some significant, I wouldn't say demands, but requirements for when he probably took that job. Or you can deliver to him financially. And that's what a lot of schools do. But you look at UCLA, you look at Boston College, I think they have expectations that we should be really good, but do you spend the way that you ultimately need to? And then a lot of it falls back on the coach. You look at a guy like Ryan Day, you're spending, that's why you got to give up play calling to Bill O'Brien, because you're spending all your time talking to recruits, talking to boosters, donors, trying to pair all this stuff together and figure out how it all works, re-recruiting guys. Before we get going, I know we got Schlegs coming up next, talk about some bowl games and some different stuff, all-star things. Should Ohio State be worried? Bill O'Brien, was in contention for that BC job earlier. Just real quickly, I mean, should there be any trepidation for Buckeye fans?
I think yes, from the standpoint of that would be a really good hire for BC, and I think that there would be some intrigue for him to want to go back there. I would also look at like 50% of the fan base who did not like the hire in the first place and say, well, congratulations. We can go out and get a different coordinator that maybe you like a little bit more. I thought it was a good hire. I think he's a really good coach. I wouldn't be shocked if he went to BC, but here we are. This is what we're at in college football, and a lot of cans of worms being opened by some of the movement that's going on right now.
Oh, because you mentioned this, the portal opens. If Chip Kelly leaves, UCLA portal is open for 30 days. Boston College, they've got 30 days to leave. I mean, people will be picking over that like roadkill with vultures, trying to figure out if there's anybody worth getting as those guys start to get in the portal, and who knows what they'll look like. So put the pin in that. We'll circle back around to some of that talk. Coming next, we're going to be joined by our guy, Anthony Schlegel. He played in the East-West Shrine game. Joshua Perry was down there for the Senior Bowl. We've got some Buckeyes that are engaged in this stuff right now. We'll talk about how they played, how they performed, and what all that means kind of next here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Josh Perry, he's been doing a great job, did a fantastic job last week, but we're going to be joined a segment a week by our guy, Anthony Schlegel, who just has been flying around, gallivanting around the country, Jacksonville, Ohio, so blown out, working like 8 jobs. Schlegs, how are we feeling? Did we get some rest on the plane when we were able to get back home?
Let me tell you something. So my plane trip, God bless the people that were sitting next to me and the people that had to sit in my seat afterward.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, because I'm 225 pounds of just sweaty mess. Because I tried to look nice, and I just had an Ohio State T-shirt on. I had some jeans on, but I mean, and I showered before, but I literally got on. I literally got on the first one, and it was quick. Like, it was like I arrived and I boarded, and I couldn't get on the Wi-Fi to try to do some work, and then I fell asleep. Like the night before, I fell asleep with my phone. Last night, even my wife's like, you gotta go to bed. I'm like holding my phone up, like asleep. I put this super patch on for like sleeping. I'm just out, man. So I slept on the first flight. Then the second flight, I had a middle seat, super hot, went like the sun's beaming right in my face. The guy was nice enough that he shut it on his own because I didn't want to say, hey man, like I'm sweating my face off. He shut it, and this bigger man sat right next to me. So we're just in there, like just boom, right? And I'm just sweating profusely all over the back of this. I was drooling a little bit and I slept really hard and I felt great, So here I am spending time with the
Did
family.
they have to
just
wake you
loving
up
on them.
when they landed?
You know what? It's crazy. I feel like when I'm sleeping on a plane, I got like a sixth sense because when I got on the second flight, I had like 5 minutes and there was a Wendy's, so I grabbed a real quick spicy chicken sandwich and some fries. I pounded the spicy chicken because like eating a sandwich on a plane, didn't really like it, but I can kind of like pull from the bag and eat the fries kind of incognito. But as the guy was coming down to collect the trash, I somehow felt his presence like one row behind me, woke up, grabbed my stuff, threw it in there, and I was out again. So, I mean, it's just something on the plane where like, like the guy's coming down to give you like the little sun chips and a little bottle of water. Boom. Oh, I'll take one. Yep. There you go. Boom. And I'm out. So it was great. It was great.
Now,
I wish I had some hands like wipes, like you wipe on the benches, right? Like at a fitness place. So I could wipe down like the headrest of that seat as my hair was just probably just sweating all over that thing.
Yeah. You mentioned something about how you showered beforehand, and I've gotten into debates with people about whether you shower before or after the flight. Now, I think the courteous thing to do is to be clean when you go on there, but it feels better when you land and you're able to hop in the shower and clean all the travel filth off of your body. So you in on the pre-shower or the post-shower?
I'm on both because I post-showered as well. Because I mean, listen, you're gonna have. I want
You got a workout when you were sleeping, Schlegs. That's the problem.
did. I literally was burning calories, and you want to be fresh when you get home because you just been sitting on a plane or in the airport for 5 hours. The amount of accumulation of swampage that you got to shower that off too. So I'm with you, Joshua. The second one, when you get home, you rinse the filth off. That feels better. But I definitely like having it to where you go on. Like I like the person. I don't want to be the stinky guy. Nobody wants to be next to that person. So I want to make sure at least I do my part for all the other passengers.
Yeah.
Good. I love how courteous you are, Schlegs. I'm
a courteous guy.
Before and after, if possible. I like to get a workout afterwards too, because I feel like when you're sitting there, you get cramped. Like I gotta re-grease the joints. But speaking of getting workouts in, it was All-Star game week. So you got the Senior Bowl, you got the Shrine game. Josh was down there for the Senior Bowl when he played and talk about his experience. But I want to dive into your Shrine game experience and kind of what that all was like. Steel Chambers, there's a couple guys down there for Ohio State in the Shrine, and that game I believe was Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. So what's that experience like and the benefits of it, and what can it kind of do for you?
Well, kudos to Proctor and Michael Hall being named the national team like D lineman, and that's really what it does, right? And I tell guys too, like when Bob and Joshua, you guys and I have talked to players, and it's like, listen, man, like the combine is one of these things. It's either up or a down. If it's neutral, then they just go back and watch the film. That's what it is. And I always tell them too, like, hey, guess what? When you play on great teams, everybody gets drafted. It's a freaking draft party. That's what happens. So focus on the team first and these other things. But in these type of games, people have questions as to what it is that you can do. So now this is supposedly the best of the best, right? That they're accumulating from college football. And if it's like, hey, I want to see what this guy can do in man coverage, well, you're going to do man coverage drills versus running backs from different schools, and people have their own pecking order. And it's all of a sudden you go out there and you get a good game rep in a drill versus a running back that they have high on their board as a second, or first round guy. Like that type of grade is just going to ultimately make you better. And what they will do is they'll go back and look at the film. And that's all this is, man. It's just you have an opportunity down there to kind of change the perspective because of the schemes that you're in college, where they believe your fit would be in the league, like a Baron Browning, right? He played a Mike linebacker, but when he goes down to one of these games, he potentially come off the edge. He's like, oh, I really didn't realize that this was this guy's capability. We now know that he could fit in these type of boxes when we draft him. That opens it up to how many teams feel that you have a draftable grade at those certain positions, and they'll go after you. So that's what I think it does. It can open your eyes, open scouts' eyes to your capabilities, and just set you up for more opportunities within the league, as opposed to kind of pigeonholing you into this is what this guy does only. So
Joshua, what was the Senior Bowl experience like for you? And you mentioned you got hurt, maybe didn't play in the game, but practice versus game and then how all that works.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's down there, so it's really good FaceTime with
yes,
NFL personnel, right? Like you get to meet scouts, you get to meet people who will be making decisions about you. They get to figure out what you're like from a personality, character standpoint. Practices, it's all about competition, and it's a great thing when you come from a place like Ohio State where everything's competitive. We're walking in the door and Schlegs is over there pairing you up with somebody to pound a Gatorade and so you can drink it the fastest. Like you get out on the Senior Bowl practice field and everything is a competitive drill. They are grading not only your skill, but are you a guy who's willing to go there? I know this year they even had competitive one-on-one drills at the end of practice, kind of match guys up, a couple of the top performers, see what they do when everybody on the field is looking at them. And so that's a big part of it. But I want to echo what Schleg said. Like, I think that there's a real opportunity for a lot of guys. And I think all of us would agree that like 99% of players need to be in the right type of system. And I don't think everybody plays in the right system in college. And you mentioned Baron Browning, it's a really good one. You have the opportunity to show the skill set of where you really fit. And I look at a guy like Roman Wilson at Michigan, and people have been buzzing about him. His route tree at Michigan was go route, deep over route. That's all they did with him. They didn't do anything else with him, and they don't throw the ball a ton. Well, now we get to see a little bit of a realistic route tree and figure out that the guy might actually have a little bit more as a player. That's why you want to go down to an event like this.
Oh, and it's interesting too, like you said, Joshua, because your scheme in college, like they're designed to win games. They're going to try to put you in the best place to win, but once they won a national championship with him doing that, so they weren't going to line up and go throw the ball 50 times. It just wasn't their offense. It's really interesting too for two guys. And Tommy was down there. Obviously, he was hurt, and one of the things you talked about, Josh, was just meeting with people. Like the NFL wants to feel comfortable with you. Like people make decisions on comfort. You hire people for jobs, a lot of times just because they're more of a known quantity than maybe someone else that could be better. And so the more comfortable they become with you, the better it is. They see you, they understand you, you talk to them, they find out what makes you tick a little bit. And so for a guy like Joshua Proctor, who, very talented player, highly recruited guy, had a ton of injuries at Ohio State, finally he was able to put it together in his senior year. Thought it was very, very beneficial for him to go down there to be able to kind of peddle his wares. But then Michael Hall is kind of in a similar situation, had some insane production, but had some injury issues. Did we anticipate those guys being able, Schlegs, to perform at that level? And I mean, I thought they'd do well down there, but I didn't necessarily think it'd be like this.
well, I think that when you're at Ohio State and the fits at Ohio State and the competition that Joshua alluded to on a daily basis with our wide receivers from the secondary perspective in Proctor and our offensive line with Michael Hall, and now they get to go against supposedly the best of the best and showcase what they can do, it opens up people's eyes. They're going to take some of those things in the past into consideration because of his size and what he does. But they're like, man, there is a fit for him on these teams, and that just elevates his stock. The question will be, can he remain healthy for now a 17-game season in the preseason and then, obviously into the playoffs, which now college football is in essence an NFL season with a 12-team playoff. So, but for him to be able to go, for those two men to be able to go out there and do that definitely elevates their stock and why they should play in it.
So it's some amazing stuff. Appreciate the stories from both of you guys there. Josh, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But some big moves are coming. So we've talked about college football and how untenable the current reality is and why coaches may be leaving. People might not like it. The Big Ten finally may be willing to do something about it in having their powers unite with maybe another conference that may feel a little ugly, but you know what? You got to figure out a way to get it done. And this might be able to steer it. So we'll tell you what all that means coming up here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. So we tried to get rid of him, but he's still here. There's one thing we forgot to get to. We are short on time, but the passing of Carl Weathers, better maybe known as Apollo Creed, maybe it's Chubbs. Maybe you loved him from Predator. Schlegs, your thoughts on the passing of the great Carl Weathers, Oakland Raider and TV star?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, watching the Rockies, like he made the Rockies, it was Rocky and it was Apollo Creed through all the ones that he was in going into 4. That's what I grew up on. That's how I loved to train, watching Rocky 4 in 1985. And then when I found Metroflex Gym when I was 12 years old, reminded me of that. This is a fact. Like, this is just how God wired me. And the things that he said really in Rocky 2 resonate with guys like us when you coach or when you play at high levels. But like, I've just been going back and I've seen the montages that everybody put on there. Like, that's a friend, right? Somebody that got beat, right? But he came back and they worked it out because he got his rematch in Rocky 3 at the beginning when they had to go into the ring. But there is no tomorrow, Rock. Like, it's like, what are you doing, Bob? You talk about it all the time. Don't confuse activity with achievement. Don't just show up, to do it, right? Or don't just get through it, grow from it. And that's really what it was. There is no tomorrow. So winter conditioning, there is no tomorrow. Focus on winning the day, whether you're in business or whatever. Focus on that. Be intentional. I love all the movies that you mentioned, right? Chubb's just over there, like, yeah, the freaking Gator. And
See, Happy? I got my hand back.
Happy. Yeah, guess what? Happy killed that deal for him, that consequently killed him. But anyways, RIP to him. It was, hey, he made an impact, right? That's something that we all want to be able to do. And he made it in a variety of different ways. So yeah, definitely sad about the passing of Carl Weathers.
Well, Schlegs, we appreciate you sticking around to get that out there because it was one of the best things. And I knew that you wanted to get to it. And he's someone that's impacted everybody. So appreciate it. Get out of here. Go spend some time with your lovely wife, and we'll catch up next week.
All right, man. Attack and dominate.
Impact of Carl Weathers as you kind of see it.
Yeah, so this is blasphemous, but I've never seen Rocky. None of the movies. It's not something I've ever watched. Bobby, we'll do this show, and this is why I can't, when I would call in with Rothman, I couldn't do it because he's seen every movie. And he would just be spitting movie lines. And I'm like, brother, I've never seen these movies. He'd be like, JP, have you ever? No, I've never seen it. And so this is a thing. I like a lot of movies I've never seen. I've never seen Rocky. Obviously, I'm very familiar.
Have you seen Happy Gilmore?
I've seen Happy Gilmore. So this is where I know him from. And so obviously, big impact there. But yesterday was illuminating for me because I did not realize that he was a legitimate athlete back in his day. Like, I, thought it was like literally just movie star swole dude. But you figure out that he's a guy who played at the highest level and then achieved in a completely different realm of life at the highest level. Guys, it's a really difficult thing to do, right? Like, I think we all try to chase, greatness in our lives in different ways, and it's hard to achieve it once. And to be able to do it in two different ways, I think is an amazing legacy.
It was fantastic. What do you do then, Josh? You just read a lot of books or something? I mean,
yeah, I do a little bit of that.
Our guy Malcolm over here getting his book, get some pub. Like,
love that. I like periodicals, magazines, things of that nature.
Get out of here. Come on. Okay. We're done with that nonsense. All right. What we need to get to here though is Big Ten and SEC. I don't want to say uniting. People said joining. We'll call it like a collab, like Nate Dogg and Warren G maybe coming together to put something out there. But we talk about how crazy it is. And they just hired Tony Petitti last year to replace Kevin Warren. I think he wants to take an aggressive approach at the Big Ten and what it needs to look like, as you can see with the expansion. I feel like Ross Bjork, the new AD at Ohio State, wants to take an aggressive approach. And it seems, Joshua, like they're going to try to sit down, Petitti and Sankey, and how do we want college sports to look? And this, I'm excited for the Big Ten to be involved in this, because if not, it felt like it was just going to be the SEC crafting what they wanted.
Yeah, and Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey have, they've had open lines of communication since Petitti took the job, and I think that's really important because we're looking at the two power conferences here, right? Like, I know we talk about Power Four, but the reality of it is Big Ten, SEC, best football and richest conferences, and I think that's what's going to drive things. And as they announced what is going on with this, what are they calling it? A joint advisory board. They said that they're not trying to usurp the power of the NCAA. I don't believe them for a second, because down the line, when you start reading some of the literature that they put out, they also talked about what their vision is for a national governing body, but they didn't say what their vision is for a new framework of the NCAA. They just said a national governing body, which I thought was super intriguing. We need this. We need people on campuses to be able to drive the direction of the sport, because the thing that I took away from Tennessee's battle with the NCAA right now is that the NCAA has created a framework that does not align with the reality of how campuses, how athletic departments should and need to operate. And until we get to that point, the sport ain't going to work.
And it's great to see them, coming together and like taking a lead. Because here's the thing, Joshua, no one can say what it should be until someone actually tries to stencil out a framework and like, hey,
Right.
we like this, we don't like that. Okay, let's have conversations about that. Let's try to figure it out. Everybody's just complaining right now and saying it doesn't work. Well, how does it work? How can it work? And when you have two of the biggest conferences, two of the wealthiest conferences saying this is what it's going to be, we like this, you push it out to the Big 12 and the ACC, and you figure out how it's going to be structured. Because the reality is, the NCAA was designed 100 years ago, whatever it is, something like that. I mean, it's been a long time coming, and it was designed, obviously, to protect athletes because that's when people were dying playing football, and so they wanted some regulation around it. But since then, I don't think anybody could have foreseen Division I, Division II, Division III, FCS, FBS. You have NIA, and you can't have rules that are the same for all of them now. It's just not going to work.
Well, the other part about it is I don't know how we think the NCAA is supposed to govern all of those different levels of competition, but then the number of sports that are under the umbrella of the NCAA. How can a set of rules work for all of these different things? That does not compute to me. It doesn't make sense how we think that we can use one blanket to cover all of those things. So the idea of what could be going on here too, which I think would be healthy for the sport and for collegiate athletics overall, is they get to a point where they're like, okay, well, volleyball does not play by the same rules as football, and basketball does not have to play by the same rules as football because they're different and they shouldn't have to.
And I think that's 36 varsity sports. Ohio State's got them all. And, God bless Gene Smith for the last 20 years of trying to say, hey, here's football. Got it. This has to be good because this is driving. It's a single income family. This has to make sure it pays for all this. And then still trying to find a way to make sure it's going to be successful over here. It's a very difficult situation. So hopefully this will put some guardrails in it. I'll put a pin in that. We got the Super Bowl coming up. Couple of Buckeyes are going to be playing. Their impact on the big game, Chiefs and Niners, coming up next. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the show here. And hey, as a quick reminder, if you're watching on Bally's, thank you. If you're watching on any type of social media, great. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, leave comments. We love all of that. It's Super Bowl week, though, Josh, which is exciting because, hey, you know what? It's here, but also now you're going to have to go the long march all the way through the rest of the winter, spring, summer until we get football ultimately again. But the Niners, 2-point favorites over the Kansas City Chiefs. It's the first Super Bowl in Vegas. You've got Nick Bosa, you have Chase Young, only 2 Buckeyes in the game, by the way. What are your kind of thoughts on the game and the impact that maybe those two will have?
Feels crazy that Kansas City is the underdog in this, and I feel a way about betting against Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and the boys there. But if there's one thing that could ruin their day, it's the 2 edge rushers and Nick Bosa and Chase Young. I think this is a huge game for Chase Young, and I know some people pulled up the social media clips of him and his lack of effort on one of the plays there in the NFC Championship game, and I don't think that's who Chase Young is as a player, but if you want to get paid the way that the big dogs get paid in the league, I think you can make an impact in the Super Bowl and certainly have something to say about that. For Nick Bosa, this is the time, right? Like, he's been really good throughout his career in the NFL, almost unblockable at times when he just decides that he's going to take the game over. And if you can do it against what feels like a Chiefs dynasty right now, this is where we start to talk about legacies here. So both these guys with a great opportunity, 2 dudes that I think can have a really, really big impact on the game just because of the way that Kansas City likes to throw it around the yard with their great quarterback. Like, it's going to be a ton of fun for them.
It is. And you mentioned, though, the defensive line. If you can get there with 4 and they've got a defensive front that can do that, you box Pat Mahomes in, you don't let him extend plays. Both, obviously, Nick and Chase, very athletic. They'll be able to corral him. Can they do that? Can they do it consistently to prevent, that 8-second play where Travis Kelce winds his way 40 yards down the field and Mahomes ultimately finds him? And that's going to be tasked with them. And you mentioned Nick Bosa, he's got a defensive player of the year a Super Bowl would be, a crowning achievement. Cause then you start talking about guys, for Hall of Fame contention. When you make
Exactly.
big time plays and moments like this, and you're like, oh, he was 5-time first team All Pro. Had 2 sacks in a Super Bowl or whatever it might be. Those are the things that change careers. And for Chase Young, like you said, this has kind of been a rebirth for him. I think he's had some success there. Obviously played well in Washington at times. You make plays on the biggest stage. Like that's how those guys get paid. Maybe he's back in San Fran. Maybe he's not. And to your point, the one play where he's loafing, and you know this as well as anyone, defensive line, it's tough.
It
Pass rush,
is.
you get tired. It's a high effort position, and I get it. But I go back to something my dad always told me, and I try never to do this. He's like, take your worst play that you've ever played in that game. And if someone were to judge you off of that, how good of a football player would they believe you to be? And that was always kind of echoing in the back of my mind when you think about, I would say a low for something that maybe isn't the best, but it's hard, especially when you're tired. And I know that you've had them, I've had them, everybody. And I try not to judge guys off their worst moments because of it.
Yeah, here's the thing too, is like, I'm not gonna sit here and make excuses for a professional, but he probably thought that play was over, right?
Yeah.
You probably thought you had Jahmyr Gibbs on the ground because you had 2 helmets at the ball, and the guy just is ridiculous on the other side. And so you get caught. And Lue Fickell used to talk about these all the time too. He called him a change of pace loaf. And he used to get so mad about those. He would be like, that's what happens because you didn't finish the play and you didn't believe that you needed to finish. And like you get exposed every once in a while doing that.
That's the old you got him. Like, hey, you got him. Like, it's good. Change of speed loaf, they'd watch. And then like you'd see all of a sudden the guy's hips drop again and you're in acceleration mode moving forward. One other thing, I don't know your affinity for this, the Taylor Swift. Are you a
Let's talk
thumbs
about
up,
it.
thumbs down? I mean, where are we coming down on, the exposure and what's going on? And how does your lovely wife, Maddie, feel about it?
Okay, so I was on the thumbs down thing, and the reason I was on it was because I thought it was like it was a media ploy. I thought that she was essentially leveraging a phony relationship to get some of the best free marketing that anybody in the world could get. The amount of time that she was on screen, even if it is only 25 seconds, people pay big money for that for an NFL game. But then you get down the line and you feel like it really is love. And I'm like, you know what? Why am I going to be mad about somebody's love? When she's out here cheering everybody on, Isaiah Pacheco scoring, and she's over here going crazy. I'm here for it. Maddie is even more of a curmudgeon than I am. So she's still making her way around it. And the part for her is that she has to see Brittany Mahomes, who she does not necessarily love, when she sees Taylor Swift. And so that's pretty much the issue there.
I get it, but you said, I think that there is something there. People take for granted how hard it would be for someone like Taylor Swift and even Travis Kelce to have a normal relationship with someone. And when you're that famous, you have that type of celebrity. So I think there is some legitimacy to it. She seems engaged. I mean, she's hanging out there, just one of the folks. And that's what you got to remember, that Joshua, celebrities are people too. They're trying to, their very best to be normal. And so I think that she obviously wants to do it. Hey, if she's willing to fly back from Japan,
dude,
to go to a game and then fly back out the next day,
that's real love.
I don't know if you've seen them, dude. It's 3.5 hours of
I know.
It's not like chilling and sitting in a chair.
No, the people get their money's worth out of her performances. I give all the credit in the world for that because I know a lot of artists mail it in when they're on tour, and she certainly doesn't.
No, and that's flying back for her boyfriend. So kudos to her. All right. Favorite segment each and every week. We answer your questions. Tailgate Talk coming up next. Welcome back into the program. And it's Tailgate Talk time, where we answer all of your questions. College football, maybe a little NFL related, Buckeye related. We got Joshua here doing a fantastic job as well. First one coming, Joshua, from Mitchell. How do you see the quarterback room playing out, and who do you think has the best shot of being the starter this fall? I think most people lean on Will Howard here, but is there a pathway for anyone else you think to potentially take that starting job?
Yeah, I think there's pathways. I think there's development. The room is going to be as competitive as we've seen it in a long time. And I think that is a great thing for Ohio State. You bring in a guy like Will Howard because he is a veteran guy who's won a conference championship and has really shown that he is a type of competitor that you want. You bring him in feeling like the offense is going to be in a really good place if he's the starter. But you also bring a cat like that in there to light a little bit of a fire under everybody else's behind too in that room to say, okay, I know I want to play right now. This guy's certainly not going to be here forever, but how can I level up my game as much as possible that I can be ready to go in the fall? And so probably feels like a Will Howard situation as of right now. But I also look at that room and they've got some wonderful young guys that, as long as they put their head down, they're willing to stay the course. I think will be some really good quarterbacks too. So yeah, looking like a good room right now.
It looks like a really good room. I think the guys get along pretty well. Will Howard, I would imagine, if he doesn't start, it's either A, because he's really struggling, or B, one of those other guys is on a rocket ship to success and they have to just be flat out outplaying everybody. But you talk about the room, and what's impressive to me is these guys come in, especially the quarterback position, because it's the Highlander position. There can only be one. And the younger guys, they're all competitive, but they're all friendly competitive about it. Like, they pull for their guys. I'm watching, Julian Sayin and Aaron Nolan, Lincoln Keenholz, Devin, and these guys are all working out, challenging each other, going back and forth, and it's pretty refreshing to see, Joshua, because you want. It's tough. Those guys all want to be the guy, and they know what is at stake. Being the starting quarterback at Ohio State, I mean, look at the last handful of guys that have done it, the success that they've had, and what it's done for their life, and so it's not insignificant. But then also doing that in a way that's constructive, and it's not going to try to tear apart the team. And I've been pretty impressed with how these guys, how mature they are in being able to handle it, where we can go at each other and we can compete, but yet we're still going to go out there and try to do what's best for the team and make sure that we're, making everybody else good as well. Got a question coming from Nick Scroggins. Nick comes in every week with almost something. And thank you. And this is, I'm going to start with you definitely on this one, Joshua, because a little bit newer to the show. But to both of you, your favorite Ohio State memory playing, but then also not playing as a fan.
Okay. So favorite memory playing, I think the best ones always come from practice. So I don't know if you were out there this day either, but if you were, you'll remember this. So I think we're getting ready to play Minnesota, and we're going our defense against the scout team. They're running Minnesota's offense, and Minnesota had this play where they basically ran a jet sweep, and if we were in a certain coverage, we had to make sure that we bumped over the right amount of gaps so everybody could get their gap fit. So they run the play, boom, I make the play. Lue Fickell looks at me and was like, "You did it wrong, run it again." And I'm looking at coach like, "No, I didn't do it wrong. I remember the card you showed us in the meeting room before practice. You told us that this play was going to be up and to be ready for it. And so I was ready for it." And he was like, "No, you weren't. Do it again." So I'm mad because my biggest pet peeve in the whole world is somebody telling me I'm wrong when I'm right. It bothers me to no end. So we run the play again. My man, Jeffy Johnson, shout out to my dude, coming around on the jet sweep. I hit him so hard. His body was parallel to the ground before it fell because I was mad. Then I took my helmet off and I walked over to Coach Fick and just like chested him up. We were face to face. And then I turned around and walked away. We weren't done with the segment. Like, we still had a rack of plays to go. And he put Cam Williams in there and just let me have my little timeout. We come back the next day and we're starting the meeting, and he looks at me and says, "Hey, Joshua, just want to let you know you did it right the first time." And I was so mad, man. It was crazy.
It's good. And it's amazing because sometimes you dig in, and there's been a couple times I've been wrong, but a lot of times as a player, I mean, when you're a veteran guy and the coach is trying to watch, and this is the thing, like, he's the D coordinator, so Fick's watching linebackers, he's trying to watch everyone else. And occasionally those guys, they'll miss one and they'll tell you. And it's awesome that he was able to own that. Gosh, my favorite one, we had a jersey scrimmage one year with Tress, and it was whoever won offense versus defense, the right to wear the red jerseys. I preferred the white anyway, but they went there, and I think Tress told Norm, the head ref, to not call any offensive holding. I mean, they're just mauling us. John, it was terrible. It was terrible. The fix was in from the beginning. I get in a fight. I yell at Norm. He throws me out of the scrimmage, the game. So I go there, I take my shirt, I take my pads off. I'm like hanging out. It's hot. I look over AJ, they get in a fight. AJ's arguing about something. There was a fumble. They said it wasn't a fumble. AJ took the ball, punts it into the stands. He's kicked out. We get smoked. And Fick the next day is just going off and going crazy. I was like, these are my leaders. You're seniors. You're getting thrown out of this. I'm like, go talk to your guy down the hall because you can't play like that. I can't play when I'm getting tackled and no one's going to let anything happen.
Oh,
so that was probably one of my favorite memories as a player. As a non-player, there are two in my mind that stick out. You were part of one, and one was kind of before Ohio State, one's after. I was at the 98 Michigan game when they tore the stadium up afterwards. Obviously, the first victory against Michigan in a while, big time win. Ran on the field. People are digging up some of the grass because that's, the grass that was on the level that, Jesse Owens ran on the track and everything else.
Yep.
So very iconic moment. And then the second time was the Sugar Bowl in 2014, Joshua. And I was sitting in a suite, not to name drop here, with Kenny Chesney and his whole crew. And they're obviously big SEC fans. His dad's a huge Bama fan. And I'll never forget, we're hanging out, and it's a little tenuous early on. And when you're a guest, you know this, you got to bite your tongue. You can't be crazy cheering. And they knew this. And Kenny's head of security, my man Bailey, awesome dude. He's a Buckeye, he's from Dayton. And so we're kind of like side cheering quietly. And when Zeke rips off that run, he turns the corner, and Kenny had to go perform, or he's going somewhere. And he literally turns and he's like, good to see you, B. And everyone turns and walks out as Zeke, and I'm watching Bailey. He had to leave with him. He goes, drink all of it in here. It's all taken care of. He's like, don't let it needs to be dry when we leave. But I'll never forget watching him run down the field. They knew, like, no one was catching that guy. He's a track dude in high school.
Yeah.
And that was probably my favorite moment as a fan.
Yeah, that was a hell of a moment, like to be in that building as a player, and a part of that was amazing. A couple moments stand out for me. 02, right? Like that was amazing as a young guy. And like, what was I? 7, 8 years old at the time. It's like, watching that brings joy. And then number 1 versus number 2 in the horseshoe in 06. Yeah. And like, I was at a point where, I was like super big Ohio State fan, but like, I'm also like, well, I got Braylon Edwards pretty good too. And so like, I'm watching like some of the best players in the country on that football field in one of the most exciting games ever.
Fantastic. Great memories there. Another great memory for a Buckeye legend. Something awesome being done for him. It's being done this year. I'll tell you what that is next as we wrap the show here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, wrapping up the show here real quickly. 50 years this year is the anniversary of Archie Griffin's first Heisman. And to commemorate that, he's getting a statue, Joshua, outside of the Rose Bowl. Want to put the hat on for it. That'll be the 4th statue, I believe, outside the Rose Bowl. There's one for Jackie Robinson. For those people who didn't know, he played football at USC as well and played in the Rose Bowl. Phenomenal athlete. Brandy Chastain has one from her iconic World Cup win. I believe Muhammad Ali has the 3rd. I think it's Cassius Clay. And now Archie Griffin will be immortalized outside of the most iconic stadium in America.
For folks who didn't know, Jackie Robinson's got a brother, I believe his name is Mac, who was a phenomenal athlete as well.
Yep.
We're talking about legends here, and I think Archie belongs in that conversation. Only 2-time Heisman Trophy winner. He's got history there at the Rose Bowl. And you cannot tell the story of college football without mentioning his name. So it's a huge honor. I'm fortunate to be able to say I know the guy because he's one of the most wonderful people out there. And, big Rose Bowl legacy because Herb Street's guy's name up there on the booth and everything too. So a lot of Buckeye fingerprints out there.
Absolutely. It's tremendous. And I don't know if and I still say this about Archie every time that I can talk about him. I don't know if there could be a better ambassador for the state of Ohio, for Ohio State University, for college football in general than Archie Griffin. What he's been able to give back, the type of guy he is. He's like my dad's contemporary. So when I talk to him, it's like talking to my dad, his brother Ray, like all those guys playing. It's something that I really enjoy. And there isn't a guy who's given back more and just done a phenomenal job shepherding. And here's the best part, Joshua. If anybody needs anything, Archie's always there for you. So great way to round out the show. We'll get a post-Super Bowl show coming at you next week here on the Big Play Network.